Hey babe, and anybody else watching, and welcome back to A Life Together. Today, Deuteronomy 14, 15, and 16. We have a lot of stuff to cover today, but this is coming off of the discussions of love, obedience, worship, and then we talked about the high places. Today, what we're going to cover, again, it's a lot. We're going to talk about food, tithes. We're going to look at debts, servants, animals, Passover, feasts, and then very, very briefly about judges. But then, we will talk very briefly about generosity as well, because we're going to touch on that. So again, 14, 15, and 16 today. So chapter 14. You are the children of the Lord your God. Do not cut yourselves or shave the front of your heads for the dead, for you are a people holy to the Lord your God. Out of all the peoples on the face of the earth, the Lord has chosen you to be his treasured possession. Do not eat any detestable thing. These are the animals you may eat: the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roe deer, the wild goat, the ibex, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. You may eat any animal that has a split hoof divided in two and chews the cud. However, of these that chew the cud or have a split hoof completely divided, you may not eat: the camel, the rabbit, or the coney. Although they chew the cud, they do not have a split hoof. They are ceremonially unclean for you. The pig is also unclean. Although it has a split hoof, it does not chew the cud. You are not to eat their meat or touch their carcasses. Of all the creatures living in the water, you may eat any that has fins and scales. But anything that does not have fins and scales, you may not eat. For you, it is unclean. You may eat any clean bird, but these you may not eat: the eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the red kite, the black kite, any kind of falcon, any kind of raven, the horned owl, the screech owl, the gull, any kind of hawk, the little owl, the great owl, the white owl, the desert owl, the osprey, the cormorant, the stork, any kind of heron, the hoopoe, and the bat. All the flying insects that swarm are unclean to you. Do not eat them. But any winged creature that is clean you may eat. Do not eat anything you find already dead. You may give it to an alien living in your town, and he may eat it, or you may sell it to a foreigner. But you are a people holy to the Lord your God. Do not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. Be sure to set aside 1/10 of all your produce each year, of all your fields produce each year. Eat the tithe of your grain, new wine and oil, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks in the presence of the Lord your God at the place he will choose as a dwelling for his name, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God always. But if that place is too distant, and you have been blessed by the Lord your God and cannot carry your tithe because the place where the Lord will choose to put his name is so far away, then exchange your tithe for silver, and take the silver with you and go to the place the Lord your God will choose. Use the silver to buy whatever you like: cattle, sheep, wine, or other fermented drink, or anything you wish. Then you and your household shall eat there in the presence of the Lord your God and rejoice. Do not neglect the Levites living in your towns, for they have no allotment nor inheritance of their own. At the end of every 3 years, bring all your tithes of that year's produce and store it in your towns, so that the Levites, who have no allotment or inheritance of their own, and the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns, may come and eat and be satisfied, and so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. Chapter 15. At the end of every 7 years, you must cancel debts. This is how it is to be done. Every creditor shall cancel the loan he has made to his fellow Israelite. He shall not require payment from his fellow Israelite or brother, because the Lord's time for canceling debts has been proclaimed. You may require a payment from a foreigner, but you must cancel any debt your brother owes you. However, there should be no poor living among you, for in the land the Lord your God gives you to possess as your inheritance, he will richly bless you, if only you fully obey the Lord your God and are careful to follow all these commands I am giving you today. For the Lord your God will bless you, as he has promised, and you will not lend to many nations, but will borrow from none. Or you will lend to many nations, you will borrow from none. You will rule over many nations, but none will rule over you. If there is a poor man living among your brothers in any of the towns of the land the Lord your God is giving you, do not be hard-hearted or tight-fisted toward your poor brother. Rather, be open-handed and freely lend him whenever he needs. Be careful not to harbor this wicked thought: the 7th year, the year for canceling debts, is near, so that you do not show ill will to your needy brother and give him nothing. He may then appeal to the Lord against you, and you will be found guilty of sin. Give generously to him, and do so without a grudging heart. Then, because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all your work and in everything you put your hand to. There will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed towards your brothers and toward the poor and needy in your land. If a fellow Hebrew, a man or a woman, sells himself to you and serves you 6 years, in the 7th year you must let him go free. And when you release him, do not send him away empty-handed. Supply him liberally from your flock. Give your threshing floor and your winepress. Give to him as the Lord your God has blessed you. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. That is why I give you this command today. But if your servant says to you, I do not want to leave you, because he loves you and your family and is well off with you, then take an awl and push it through his earlobe into the door, and he will become your servant for life. Do the same for your maidservant. Do not consider it a hardship to set your servant free, because his service to you these 6 years has been worth twice as much as that of a hired hand, and the Lord your God will bless you in everything you do. Set apart for the Lord your God every firstborn male of your herds and flocks. Do not put the firstborn of your oxen to work, and do not shear the firstborn of your sheep. Each year you and your family are to eat them in the presence of the Lord your God at the place he will choose. If an animal has a defect, is lame or blind, or has any serious flaw, you must not sacrifice it to the Lord your God. You are to eat it in your own towns. Both the ceremonially unclean and the clean may eat it, as if it were gazelle or deer, but you must not eat the blood. Pour it out on the ground like water. Chapter 16. Observe the month of Abib, and celebrate the Passover of the Lord your God, because in the month of Abib he brought you out of Egypt by night. Sacrifice as the Passover to the Lord your God an animal from your flock or herd at the place the Lord will choose the dwelling for his name. Do not eat it with bread made with yeast, but for 7 days eat unleavened bread, the bread of affliction, because you left Egypt in haste, so that all the days of your life you may remember the time of your departure from Egypt. Let no yeast be found in your possession in all your land for 7 days. Do not let any of the meat you sacrifice on the evening of the first day remain until morning. You must not sacrifice the Passover in any town the Lord your God gives you, except in the place where he will choose as a dwelling for his name. There you must sacrifice the Passover in the evening, when the sun goes down, on the anniversary of your departure from Egypt. Roast it and eat it in the place the Lord your God will choose. Then in the morning return to your tents. For 6 days eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day hold an assembly to the Lord your God, and do no work. Count off 7 weeks from the time that you begin to put the sickle to the standing grain. Then celebrate the Feast of Weeks to the Lord your God by giving a free will offering in proportion to the blessings the Lord your God has given you. And rejoice before the Lord your God at the place he will choose as a dwelling place for his name. You, your sons, your daughters, your men servants and maid servants, the Levites in your towns and the aliens, the fatherless and the widows living among you. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and follow carefully those decrees. Celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. For 7 days after you have gathered the produce of your threshing floor and your winepress, be joyful at your feast. You, your sons, your daughters, your men servants and maid servants, and the Levites, the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns. For 7 days celebrate the feast to the Lord your God at the place the Lord will choose. For the Lord your God will bless you in all your harvest and in all the work of your hands, and your joy will be complete. 3 times a year all your men must appear before the Lord your God at the place he will choose. At the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Tabernacles, no man should appear before the Lord empty-handed. Each of you must bring a gift in proportion to the way the Lord your God has blessed you. Appoint judges and officials for each of your tribes in every town the Lord your God is giving you, and they shall judge the people fairly. Do not pervert justice or show partiality. Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and twists the words of the righteous. Follow justice and justice alone, so that you may live and possess the land the Lord your God is giving you. Do not set up any wooden Asherah pole beside the altar you build to the Lord your God, and do not erect a standing stone, for these the Lord your God hates. So again, there was just a lot of material on a lot of different subjects there. I did like this note that I came across here, and it's in relation to verse 15 or chapter 15, and there's actually 2 verses. Verse 4. So 15:4. However, there should be no poor among you, for the land the Lord your God is giving you to possess as your inheritance, he will richly bless you. So talking about the poor there. And then also in verse 11, there will always be poor people in the land. Therefore, I command you to be open-handed towards your brothers and towards the poor that are needy in your land. So it seems like a bit of a contradiction. And then we read this note here. Really liked this note. At first glance, this verse seems to contradict verse 4. This is talking about verse 11, which says that there should be no people in Israel. Moses knew the difference between what should happen and what will happen. God's blessings in the promised land ought to have eliminated poverty if the Israelites had obeyed completely. But since some of the people always fall short, poverty remains a problem. Jesus confirmed this in a passing remark in Matthew 26:11. As a result, in our time, as in Moses's, generosity is essential. I love that. I mean, if we're talking about what our lives should look like in fear to the Lord, a very practical application is generosity for God's people, for people that are not yet believers, for people that we don't agree with, for people that have hit hard times. For everyone, we're encouraged to be generous givers. That doesn't mean that we're not wise with our wealth. We're still stewarding what God has given us. But that means that we're not tight-fisted, that we're open-handed and willing and happy to give to others. That's something that we should always make an effort to do. Worth praying about. Let's do it. God, I just thank you for all the provision that you have given. You have given us so much, Lord. If we feel like we don't have a lot, Lord, let us take an inventory of what we do have and what you have given us, God. And then after that, Lord, help us to recognize that we are not just to sit on wealth or sit on what you've given us, God, but it is to be used for you and to your kingdom. Lord, help us to do that as we seek to glorify you and throughout everything we do, especially in generosity, to seek your glory. We thank you again so much for it and infinitely more for the gift of your Son. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. That is about all I have for you today. As always, know that I appreciate you, and wife, appreciate you tons, and I will plan on seeing you tomorrow. Have a good one.